Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 10 of Ask the Panel Guys. We got some special guests today. We actually have smart people on the broadcast today. Here we have David Altfeld and Chris Reutlinger, and they are going to go over with you today deflection in panel systems. How does deflection affect the way we design our panels?
You know, Zeke, I'm glad you asked. David and I run into this every day when we do designing these panels for our systems and our panels that go on buildings. And so we're going to walk through it today and give you guys a little idea of sort of what goes into it, what we need to consider, and what we need to take into account to make sure that our panels behave properly. All right, gang, so what we have here is actually a piece of our 1/8 inch aluminum, and David and I are going to use this to pretty much show you sort of what deflection is. So if I go ahead and try to bend this panel downward, David, can you give them an idea of what really we consider when we're looking at deflection, what it is?
Deflection is any sort of movement due to a load. So Chris has applied a bending load and this panel has moved down. That's deflection. Could be due to a wind load or any other force.
All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about what deflection is, why do people care? Why is it important, huh? So, you know, one of the biggest things for us when we're looking at how our panels perform on exterior parts of buildings is that we want them to behave properly, and we want them not to, one, get damaged themselves, nor damage any sort of components that are behind the panels. And if there is too much movement of that panel, we can either damage the panel itself, what's behind it, or even sometimes the seals between the adjacent panels, which can allow water in and water to infiltrate the building, which is also considered a failure on our part. So that's really the reasons why that we want to make sure that the deflection doesn't exceed certain limits so that we don't have those sort of negative effects happening in our systems.
So who defines the requirements, deflection requirements? It could come from material suppliers. Some of our products, like stone panels, the material supplier tells us that it can bend this amount without cracking. That would be critical, obviously. The requirement could also come from building codes or the project owners or designers like architects, structural engineers, or building envelope consultants.
All right, so now that we know a little bit about what deflection is and where the requirements come from, how does it actually affect what we do when we design our panel systems? And to start with that, we kind of need to understand what really we're designing for. And in most cases, we're designing for wind loads. So we're trying to resist those wind loads that are either trying to push those panels into a building or pull those panels off. And depending on where the project is, what kind of type of project it is, as well as how tall the building is, those wind loads can vary quite a bit. Anywhere from probably 10 times depending on the location and the size of the building and the project type. And so when we look at deflection, we really have criteria that's focused on two different really parts. One is the panel face itself and how much that panel face itself can deflect, and then the other one is how much the entire assembly. So we also have usually extrusions and other kinds of structural sub-assemblies that are beneath those panels, and those also have certain deflection requirements as well. Lastly, we wanted to sort of hit on that, you know, we really design for two things. We design for strength, making sure the panels stay on the building, but then we also design for serviceability, and when we design for serviceability, we're designing for loads that are about 30% less than what we would design for strength. So those serviceability requirements are really intended to be used for designs when a building is still within a serviceable environment. Say not a hurricane, not a tornado, you know, but hey, this is just maybe a storm that's coming through and we want to make sure those panels perform properly. So David, so when we have all these requirements that we need to meet on our projects, what are some ways that we can actually meet all those requirements in different ways with the different panel systems that we have?
We can, of course, add more fasteners or increase the strength of the materials that we're using, and we can stiffen the panels with stiffeners.
Okay, great. So those are some ways we can meet that deflection criteria while still giving the desired look for the architect and, say, the project owner.
Yeah, most of the things that we would do to stiffen panels would not be visible. It would be behind the panels.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, thanks for all this information on deflection, guys. If there's anything that you want the audience here to remember from this presentation or this video, what would it be about deflection?
Well, one really important thing about deflection is that it's second to stress design. We want to make sure the panels don't come off the building. So if they do deflect a little bit, that's certainly better than them coming off the wall.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, guys, that concludes episode 10 of Ask the Panel Guys, where we talked about deflection in panel systems. I appreciate our guest speakers, David Altfeld and Chris Reutlinger. Finally got some smart guys on the show after 9 episodes. So appreciate that. As usual, follow us on social media at the Panel Guys on Instagram, at www.MillerClapperton.com, and tune in a little while for episode 11 of Ask the Panel Guys. Thank y'all.